In the heart of a crumbling city where the echoes of laughter mixed with the cries of the forgotten, there lived a man named Osita. By day, he painted a wide grin on his face, entertaining children and the wealthy at grand celebrations. But by night, he sat in a dimly lit room with his frail mother, counting the few coins he had earned, wondering if they would last till the next meal. Osita had always been different. His laughter was forced, his joy borrowed from those who paid to see him perform. But inside, he carried the weight of a world that had never been kind to him. His mother, once a vibrant woman, now lay sick, her body wasting away with each passing day. She often whispered stories of a father Osita had never met, a man who once ruled the city's entertainment scene, a man who had abandoned them. Osita's mother always believed that their suffering would end one day. She told him that destiny had greater plans for him. "You were meant to be someone important, my son," she would say, her weak fingers tracing his painted smile. But Osita had long stopped believing in fairy tales. He had spent his entire life trying to fit into a world that wanted nothing to do with him. The children at his performances laughed at his tricks, but their parents barely acknowledged his existence. To them, he was just another nameless clown, a man meant to entertain, but never to be heard. One night, as he returned home from a long day of performing, Osita found an eviction notice nailed to his door. He knew what this meant. The city was pushing them out, making room for those who could afford to stay. His mother, too weak to move, would not survive the streets. He needed money, and he needed it fast. Desperate, Osita sought out an old friend, Olisa, a man known for dealing in the city's underbelly. Olisa was a trickster, a man who knew how to bend the rules and make a fortune while doing it. "Osita, you have a gift," Olisa said, watching him closely. "People laugh at you because they think you're harmless. Use that. Take from those who take from you." At first, Osita resisted. But the hunger in his mother's eyes, the fear of losing her, pushed him to make a choice. The first time was easy. A rich man, too drunk to notice his missing wallet. The second time, a merchant who had cheated him out of his wages. With each crime, Osita felt something shift inside him. The fear faded, replaced by a thrill he had never known. The city had made a fool out of him for too long. Now, it was his turn to laugh. In the midst of his descent, Osita met Vera, a woman who saw beyond his painted face. She was a dancer, a woman whose own life had been a struggle. She understood pain, understood what it meant to be invisible. Vera was drawn to him, to the sadness hidden behind his smiles. For the first time in his life, Osita felt seen. With her, he didn't need to pretend. He could be himself, whoever that was. "Osita, you don't have to do this," she whispered one night as he prepared for another heist. "You don't have to become what they say you are." But it was too late. The city had already branded him as a freak, a joke. And now, he would show them just how dangerous a joke could be. The crimes became bolder, the laughter louder. Osita no longer stole just to survive, he stole to send a message. He painted his face, not for entertainment, but to mock those who had ignored him. He was no longer just a clown. He was a symbol of rebellion, of chaos. But with notoriety came danger. The city's leaders wanted him silenced. The people who once laughed at his jokes now whispered his name in fear. And then, the moment that changed everything, a night of celebration, a wealthy gathering, and a final act that would define his legacy. It was the grandest celebration the city had ever seen. The richest men and women gathered in shimmering garments, oblivious to the suffering outside the palace walls. The laughter of the elite filled the halls, but Osita was there too, hidden behind his painted mask. He had come with a purpose, to give them a performance they would never forget. Olisa had provided him with an entrance. A servant's outfit, a tray of wine, and a knife strapped to his ankle. Osita moved through the crowds unseen, his heart pounding in rhythm with the drumbeat of the celebration. And then, he saw him, the man who owned the city, who had built his fortune on the backs of the poor. The man his mother had once spoken of in hushed tones. His father. The realization hit Osita like a tidal wave. His fingers curled around the hilt of the knife. The world blurred around him. The room, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all faded. There was only him, and the man who had abandoned them. With slow steps, he approached. Osita's hands trembled as he gripped the blade, his mind clouded with rage and grief. But before he could strike, a voice cut through the noise. "Osita, don't." It was Vera. She had followed him, her eyes pleading with him to stop. "This isn't the way." For a moment, he hesitated. The weight of his choices bore down on him. But the laughter in the room, his father's laughter, mocked him, reminded him of the years of suffering. With a cry of anguish, he lunged. The crowd gasped. Guards rushed forward. The night that was meant for celebration turned into chaos. The city's elite fled as screams filled the air. Osita's knife found its mark, but not in his father. In the scuffle, Olisa had stepped in, the blade struck him with devastating force. His eyes wide with shock. "Run, Osita!" Olisa choked out before collapsing. Osita stood frozen as the world around him spiraled into madness. Vera grabbed his hand, pulling him away before the guards could seize him. Osita's breath came in ragged gasps as he and Vera ran through the winding alleys of the city, the sounds of shouts and clanking armor behind them. The royal guards were relentless, their torches casting eerie shadows against the cracked walls. Olisa was gone. The weight of his friend's sacrifice burned in Osita's chest, but there was no time to mourn. Vera pulled him forward, leading him toward a hidden passage beneath an old, abandoned theater. "This way," she urged, ducking into the darkness. Osita hesitated for a split second. He could still hear the distant laughter of the man who had abandoned him, the man who should have died tonight. But the city was no longer safe. He had declared war against the powerful, and now, there was no turning back. As they disappeared into the tunnels beneath the city, the guards stormed the alley, searching for a ghost. The tunnel smelled of damp earth and old secrets. Vera led the way with confidence, her steps sure despite the pitch-black surroundings. Osita could barely see, but he could hear, the whisper of dripping water, the distant scurrying of unseen creatures, and the faint hum of voices up ahead. Finally, the path opened into a hidden enclave, where the city's forgotten people gathered. The ones cast aside, the ones who lived in the shadows. Men and women with scars, thieves with sharp eyes, and children with hollow bellies all turned to look at Osita. "They'll be hunting for you," an old man rasped from the corner. Osita exhaled, his painted face streaked with sweat and blood. "Then let them come." The city wanted him dead. But now, he had an army. Word of Osita's attack spread like wildfire. The poor whispered his name in reverence, while the wealthy cursed it in fear. He had become more than a man, he was a symbol. In the depths of the underground, Osita learned of the city's injustices from the mouths of those who suffered most. The king's soldiers abused their power, merchants cheated the desperate, and the rich feasted while children starved. Vera watched him closely. "You have their attention, Osita. But what will you do with it?" Osita's painted grin was no longer just for show. "We show them that the forgotten will not be ignored." The first strike came when the city's nobles awoke to find their prized possessions missing. Next, a corrupt merchant discovered his wealth mysteriously distributed among the poor. The elite trembled as masked figures, their faces painted in white grins, emerged from the shadows. Osita had started something that could not be undone. Yet, with each victory, his soul darkened. His laughter, once forced, had become real, twisted and filled with something dangerous. The city feared him now, and he relished it. The king could not ignore the rebellion any longer. "Find the masked clown," he commanded, his voice like thunder in the palace halls. "And burn his world to the ground." The guards moved swiftly, cracking down on the poor, raiding homes, and beating anyone suspected of aiding Osita. The underground city trembled as friends disappeared overnight. The night was heavy with smoke and sorrow. The underground tunnels were no longer a sanctuary, they were a graveyard. The king's soldiers had found them, setting fire to the forgotten world Osita had built. Vera stood before him, her eyes filled with desperation. "You have to stop this. It's over." Osita shook his head. "No. It's just beginning." But deep down, he knew she was right. The city had won. His rebellion had only brought suffering to the very people he sought to protect. As the flames climbed higher, Osita made his choice. He stepped onto the charred remains of his stage, lifting his arms as the soldiers surrounded him. And then, he laughed. A deep, hollow sound that echoed through the ruins. A final performance. The soldiers moved in, and the laughter stopped. In the years that followed, the people whispered his name. Some called him a villain, others a hero. But one thing was certain, Osita's story was never forgotten. And somewhere, in the darkest corners of the city, a new masked figure painted a smile onto their face. For the legend of the laughing man would never die.